understanding the technology that powers the money is essential. Knowing the business drivers that inspire how the money is made is crucial. Bridging the gap between the mind of the technologist and the mind of the business is monumental. That is what TBF is all about. Let's start this never-ending conversation. It's time.
Happy Friday. We are back with another episode of the Tech Behind FinTech. I'm excited for my guest today, Matt Almeida. Matt, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Andy. How about yourself?
Doing very, very well. Today's topic, how FinTech CTOs Propel product launches. This is a show that I've been wanting to have for a very long time, and I'm happy to have my brilliant former colleague here. We're going to get into it and really talk about things. So before we do it, let's do some housekeeping things. My name is Matthew Almeida. I'm the host of the Tech Behind FinTech. We are streaming live from Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, and we also have a stream going from Instagram. Those join from Instagram, see some people, Fatima, what's going on? Thank you very much. And like always, please drop comments. If you drop comments on the platforms of Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitch, it'll be part of the show. If you ask questions on Instagram, I'll just read it. But if you want to go to the techbehindfintech.com on Instagram and click on our YouTube links, you should be able to see the show live there. Your questions can become part of the episode. So on that note, without further ado, although he's a returning guest, I still have to do right by him and read his bio. So let me do that so you guys can, if whoever hasn't seen Matt in previous episodes, can get to know him right now. So on that note, Matt Almeida. Matt has been fortunate to stumble into a variety of specializations through a decade in the software development industry. He's held various roles with focuses among writing and maintaining distributed microservices, designing secure cloud architecture and data storage, creating and implementing CI/CD pipelines, using DevOps best practices, project and team management, and developing executive strategy. Lately, Matt has tied all of these skills together to kick off a new venture, Sophist Software Consulting, with the goal of assisting startups and early companies find the right solutions for any and all of their technical challenges they may face. So, like I said, today's topic, engineering success, how FinTech CTOs propel product launches. When you first hear that, what are your thoughts on that title?
Where are we at? Right? What are the needs? What's the company doing right now? You know, are we trying to find the product and tour it out there? Are we looking for product market fit? Do we have it and we need to scale? You know, what are the constraints on the problem space, right? What do we actually need to be doing with this product, with this project? So, you know, the first place my mind goes is to questions, right? How else? Give me the context, right? Where are we going with this? But that's how I like to pick things apart. Is really what's the goal? Where are we getting to? And you know, what are the constraints we have to deal with?
Obviously, when you talk about constraints, it could be a budget constraint, it could be a time constraint, it could be, you know, various things. It could be a regulatory constraint we have to deal with, and all of these things, obviously, we have to know. Let's take it from the perspective of a startup, right? Mm-hmm. Early stage startup. They have a good idea, got their seed fund. They want to go live with some sort of MVP to really fully flesh out the idea, right? How do we approach it from a technology standpoint?
I'm a huge fan of the KISS method. Have you heard of the KISS strategy before?
Keep it simple, stupid.
That's right. Yep. Right.
I haven't heard that in such a long time, but as soon as you said it, somewhere in back of my head, it's like, yeah, that's cool, man. Happy I remember that.
Yeah. It's a fun one, right? Because it really it just drives the point home that what are we trying to do here, right? We just need to do X with it. And it's so easy to get carried away and say like, oh man, there's these bells and whistles. We could do this with things. Oh, I found this new framework and I want to throw that in. But time is of the essence, right? Time is something you really don't have much of. And so you really got to, square away, right? What time do we have? What experiences do we have? And how are we going to just throw something up that's going to be executable, right? Do we need to show this to someone for funding? Do we need to get users on this to actually start getting some feedback, right? What do we need to do? And then find the shortest possible line to get there. Because there's really no time to waste on an idea that might not take off, especially when you're early on.
Well, that's definitely some interesting points that you raised, because I like when I talk to hardcore technologists in any realm, whether it's security, whether it's developers, or any stuff. And when I ask these types of questions, tools, the technology, we're going to use this cloud, that doesn't even come up in the conversation yet. It's just because I love it, because I do the same thing with security. It's like talking. I'm like, well, let's just talk about like what are you trying to build and what are the risks with that? Like, can you just have a conversation? And then we're gonna get technical later on the path, but early on, So I like the KISS method that you proposed. So we have that on the table, right? In terms of in this mock scenario, let's throw some other things to it, right? We have to produce something, so that we do have to present it to our potential funders for more capital. Good idea. We're still trying to figure out product market fit. We have, because we are in the Tech Behind FinTech show, right? This is a FinTech potential startup. So there are going to be some sort of, if not regulatory constraints, we have to think about security. AI is huge, so we're potentially going to be leveraging some AI models and so forth. So I'm just trying to paint the picture and just see, like, in terms of from and now they're coming to you, right? Some founders are coming to you and they're saying, you know what, we're not technologists per se, but we have this really good idea, and we really think it could work. And here is the situation, and we want to bring you on board to consult or become a co-founder. So how does that play out then?
Yeah, well, like I said, you search for the goals. You really search for what we're trying to do with this. And once you get that set up, right? Once you kind of have cleared, like, hey, we have something that we can show off, right? It's in tools that we're strong in. Something that might be cheap and easy. That gives you a chance to spend a little time on your internal mechanisms, right? So once you have something out, right? There's going to be a million pieces of tech debt or something on that, right? You might have just pushed this manually up to the cloud. Your tests might not be all there. Your mechanisms to deploy might be, like I said, manual, right? And you need to kind of put some structure in place, lay some rails for you to continuously deliver on this, because changes are going to be fast and frequent. So the sooner that you can kind of get the external needs satisfied, then you can really start working like, okay, can I build myself a CI/CD pipeline that's simple, that's easy, and it's going to cut down the time it takes to iterate and redeploy something should there be a mistake, should there be something else we need. And the more time you can spend on the systems that kind of support you, you're going to get massive efficiency gains moving forward, because you'll come under this new problem, and it's not like you're solving the whole world all over again. You just have to focus on that one problem, with this entire operation center of, designing, testing, deploying, and executing. So the sooner you can get to kind of the internal mechanisms that allow the development process to move smoothly, the better time you're going to have.
So let's break down a couple of things that you said for some of the audience members who might not be familiar with these terms. But some of the audience, they have ideas, but the technology is where they get stuck. So you mentioned something called tech debt. Can you explain what tech debt is?
Yeah, tech debt is a notion of making a trade-off, right? You might say, hey, we really need to get this live. We don't need to have a very full test suite. We may not need to have things stored in proper environment variables because we're just pushing this to prod right now to test, or we're just processing it to dev to get some feedback on, and so you can push out to one environment, but what happens if it gets promoted up? So there's elements of the development process that you kind of skim over, that you're like, I know we'll need this, but this is not a priority right now. I mean, it is a priority, but ruthless prioritization. You don't have time to fight all the fires. I know you like that phrase.
Inside joke, watching my ruthless prioritization.
But that just brings it back to there's things that you're going to want to do and you won't be able to. Sometimes that's a feature, something that you want to roll out, and sometimes that's an internal support mechanism for your code, and you really you'll get buried in tech debt if you just leave it behind. You'll have a very clunky, overweight, inefficient system if you never circle back to improve on things, and so it will behoove you immensely to kind of keep a track of all these things. It's nice if you have a sprint board like Jira, where you can say, hey, here's all the tickets, here's the things we need to do. And so you're like, hey, we need to do this. I need to put this somewhere on like a list that's not front of mind. It's a great way to keep track of like, oh, hey, we still have these little bits of this project to clean up. And so ideally, when you have some breathing room with your project, you can take the time to circle back and hit those up before they haunt you, before they become a bigger albatross to slow down progression on the project.
Now that's good. We're going to kind of break down some other stuff. So we like to give some audience members that give comments, give them some shine. Christopher Moon, a Facebook comment, laughed out loud. Well put. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate that. So, great points with tech debt, and I like how you said it's a trade-off, but using some sort of tracking system, in the industry, we use Jira a lot, and we have a whole thing called Agile and something called a backlog where you're keeping track of all these things so you can circle back. You also mentioned CI/CD pipeline. Can you break that down for people that might not understand that?
Yeah. What is a cloud? It's someone else's computer, right? So when you have something that's running, where is it running? Right, you have to have a machine that's performing an executable. It needs to be open to the public, whether it be via an API or some other means, and that is a product. Well, how does that working up there get there? Right, so there's a process, kind of like laying rails, where you essentially say, okay, we're going to run through. Okay, we're going to take this and this code that you have that you think is finished now. We're going to do some things to it. We're going to run some linting on it to make sure the format's well. We're going to run some tests to make sure there aren't any errors. You can even perform security standard checks on that to make sure that everything is, all the check boxes are in place. You're not doing anything terrible. You're not making any mistakes. And then once you know that code is validated, you take that and you put it somewhere to run. And so the common model we see a lot these days is it runs in the cloud. So either AWS or GCP, or Azure will have these servers running, and you need to take your code, you need to put it on those servers, you need to tell those servers how to run. And you can do this manually, right? You can go into a console, you can drag and drop, you can, run some executions, but, you can also run that from a command line. It's real simple to say, hey, push this out to the cloud, and I want you to run it and open these ports. But again, if you have to interfere, if you have to actually interact with things each step of the way, it's going to slow you down, right? There's a lot of pieces to this system, and you want to make sure that that's just smooth, that just works for you. So you build a structure, a CI/CD pipeline that goes through and it validates your code, it tests it, it does all this automatically for you, and if something goes wrong, it'll stop. It'll tell you what's up. But if nothing's wrong, it continues on to ultimately culminate in deploying out to the cloud and running. So you can get lost in the weeds, right? How am I going to run in this environment? How am I going to authorize in this environment? That takes some time to really understand, depending on your cloud, the mechanisms you're using. And it gets frustrating if you don't have it set. So ideally, I like to get that done early so you have a good understanding. Okay, we authenticate this way to the non-prod environment. We authenticate this way to the prod environment. And those elements are kind of injected in as the code gets run through this pipeline. It says, okay, well, this code, it needs to go to non-prod first. We're going to push it here. We know where to get these environment variables. And it puts a lot of structure in the code, a lot of structure that's very safe and secure, right? You don't want to hard code environment variables. You don't want to, have to enter in passwords manually or share those around. All of these things can be embedded into the system that you have for this deployment. And falling back on automation is the key to staying sane and making things work, frankly.
Oh, I absolutely love it, right? Because, earlier on in my career before, I hit every stage of the SDLC. Now I'm primarily in security, but early on it was like QA and release management. And I like what you said in a sense of, yeah, we have this great idea, right, that we're trying to push forward, but when we look at it from a CTO or development perspective, right, let's get our infrastructure capabilities sound early. This will enable us to iterate faster on the code that we're developing so we can push it out. You can see it. We make changes rather than focus a lot on the code and building the product, but then have this really clunky way to get it onto a cloud in a production environment or even a non-prod environment so the users can see. So from your strategy perspective, it's like, you know what? We're going to work on this, but we're really going to tighten up our effort so we can push it out. Obviously, you're going to make iterations on your CI/CD pipeline over time because, based on what you said with tech debt, you probably will accumulate some tech debt because it's not an optimally fully automated or some things may be missing. But the idea of getting it from point A to point B and focusing on that particular infrastructure, you like to do extremely early, which is I personally feel is a great practice. Because like I said, you can see the different versions of your product as you're developing in real time.
Absolutely. And it cuts out the room for mistakes to be made when you are at the point of deploying. And that's where, you have high risks of leaving an environment variable not in a secret, passing the wrong things in, leaving the wrong log level in. There's all these things that if you have to remember each step of it every time of the way, you've got a probability of messing up. And one mess up might not do a lot, but it might be a huge security hole. It could ruin a company if you push something out there with a fully open database. So these are the things that you want to not have to think about. You want to just trust.
No, that's obviously my background in security, that warms my heart. You saying that because obviously it's very important. I mean, the concept is you don't want to you want to basically integrate security early on throughout your process rather than trying to bolt it on when you're already live in production because the cost goes up and you just increase your risk dramatically. So that's awesome. Okay, so in everything we're talking about, we talked about the scenario, this mock scenario that we painted, and we talked about the infrastructure and putting a good setup in terms of to get things out. How do you make decisions on which cloud environment to go towards? Like, there's three major ones right now. It's AWS, GCP, Azure. And depending on some companies now that they're going, they're building like high intensity models. They're even looking for other GPU resources outside of that. So, like, how does that work in terms of to start thinking through what type of environments are going to be needed? Like, how does that thought process work with from a CTO perspective?
That's a great question. um, I ideally, again, it depends where you're coming from and what your goals are. Um, it honestly, I don't think you can make a wrong choice right off the bat. And this might be fighting words for some people, but you really just need something that works, something that allows you to, demonstrate, get some feedback, let people use this, and that's just going to be kind of lightweight work up front. You can start to lay some foundation, build, CI/CD pipelines and whatnot, and some of that is going to be necessary. But until you're you've received a fair amount of funding, and you have some very specific things you need, or maybe you've been able to work out that, like, okay, our needs are going to be far much more expensive on this cloud, or we can get a deal with this vendor. Honestly, I say be flexible as possible, and then find out what is going to help the business the most. I personally have had the most experience with AWS. So if just, said, okay, start something, I would probably pop in with that, just because I know it's going to be the quickest amount of time for me to get something moving, to get something, presentable and showable. That said, I'm working on a stealth company right now with some friends, and we're rolling in GCP, and I'm finding some real nifty tooling there. They've done some things with security keys and tokens that AWS is going to have to respond to, because they've really tightened up security with some of their new things. So I'm really enjoying and learning the new vendor. But at the end of the day, it's kind of half dozen one way, six the other, up until you're like, hey, well, the bottom line financially, we're going to shave 15% of fees off if we move with this vendor. It's a balancing act, because you don't want to get too married to one that makes it impossible to switch. But just kind of keeping an eye on what you really need, and making sure you're able to make those assessments in terms of cost, in terms of performance, a fair amount of time ahead of actually having to make the decision will kind of free you up to think about how you want to go through that.
So I like that. So, it depends on it's almost like the person in that CTO role early stage who's going to also be the technical architect. Sometimes it's based on their own personal experience, right? Because at the end of the day, the goal is to get a product out in front of your investors, or or in front of your beta users or whatever. So it's like, what is the most efficient and quickest way to do that? And if I'm coming in, right, from a CTO perspective, and I have a vast amount of experience with this one particular vendor or cloud, it's like, listen, let's go with that for now, because here's the goal. Then, as that goal is met, and then we start saying, okay, are we going to expand it to others? We can now start thinking about, from a cost perspective, a business perspective. Okay, do we have to migrate? That makes sense. But initially, let's go with the one where we can get the most resources to assist us in getting to that goal. That makes sense. So what other architectural concerns that, like, the questions you have to kind of look at and ask yourself as you are building something like this out?
It's always great to flip through the documentation, see how well they are at communicating this stuff, because you're going to be neck deep in these docs. It's guaranteed. So you might as well find one that's spent the time to focus on a communication pattern that works for you. Community support is another big one, right? If you Google a question about, like, hey, how does this work, right? Do you get a lot of people working along the similar thing? Do you see Stack Overflow posts with these answers? Do you see just a litany of official documents that might deal with the resources but not actually be of value to a developer trying to, like, pick apart how it works, how it doesn't work? Just kind of getting a vibe of how well documented and how well supported they are through community involvement and community interactions goes a long way, because there are going to be late nights when you're sitting there staring at a screen, and you're going to want to not have to rack your brain to figure out what they're trying to say. You really want to have a parasocial relationship with your document writers. You should be fans of them. If you're not, that's a problem. If you can't find information, then you're going to run into blockers, and it's going to take you an indeterminate amount of time to resolve that. And the scariest thing in tech planning, I think, is indeterminate amounts of time. Because you can't predict if this is something that's going to stump your team for a month or if you get through it in a day. So it creates an inhibition on being able to project and estimate other things. So the less unknowns. The less unknown unknowns you can have, the better you are. If you can identify what you don't know, and you feel like you have a pretty solid trail of breadcrumbs to that, you're in great shape. But it's the unknown unknowns where you're just like, okay, I think there's something about authentication with this. And I got to figure out which works. I see a variety of ways shown, right? I don't know why they're doing it this way or this way, right? You're going to need to know that. And you're going to need to, over time, form a strong opinion about why you're doing it this way. So, yeah, learn your learning style and figure out what applies best to you.
I think that's such an Easter egg that I hope others will really catch, because I caught it, and I want to kind of drill down on that what you just said. I think people don't necessarily look at how big a strong community for a particular vendor is. How big are they responding to questions on the community pages and so forth? You don't really, when you think about it, when you're stuck and it's like 11 at night and you're trying to figure something out that's been stumping you all day, then you either realize how good the community is or how bad the community is. And I think like being proactive during the architecture phase, and you know what? I'm not only going to take this from from an architecture and trying to architect your program from a CTO level. I'm looking at it also from a CISO level. I'm looking at it just in choosing your vendors, right? Because I can honestly say that sometimes you get caught up, at least with me, in looking at like different vendors for different things on the security side and so forth. It's more so in the function. And obviously, every single vendor is going to say like they're the best thing since sliced bread, right? Because that's what they do. Like, we're like the best, and blah, 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 right? Of course. But I didn't really think about the importance of the community. It's one of those things throughout my career. I just literally took it for granted. Now, when you said it, I'm like, wow, he's absolutely correct. Like, because you rarely go looking for that early on until you have a problem. Right? Mm-hmm. You go, of course, you might look at the documentation, mainly around the functionality of things that you need. You're like, oh, wait, how does that work? That makes sense. They do that. Okay, how would I exactly implement it? But you don't proactively look for, wait, let me look at the community. Let me kind of read through that to see what kind of problems they saw. That is an Easter egg, man. That's awesome. Like, I can't speak for anyone else. I particularly have taken that for granted until I needed it. Then when you look it up when you need it. So that is a pretty awesome concept to really look at it from a proactive standpoint. I had tons of vendor conversations. That's a great jewel. I hope others catch that, and probably when we clip this up in the future, I'm going to make sure that this clip is highlighted. It's a really awesome jewel that you just dropped. So, in thinking about that, then, all right, so you selected the different vendors, you looked at the community, okay, these are my options. Let me select. Now what else is involved with putting together the architecture for the program?
Architecture doesn't necessarily need to be flavored. Right? You can say, okay, well, we need some kind of pub subsystem here, right? We need to do this. We need to do this. You can design kind of the architecture of how you want the things to work together, and then if you can do that ahead of time, another way to kind of vet vendors is like, well, what is their, right? We talked about pub sub. What is their the functionality around that. Does it serve my interests? Once you kind of understand the pieces of functionality that you need, okay, we need a data store here. Right. Okay. Well, what kind of data store? What do you need? So you can draw that out without having to say like, okay, well, this is AWS infrastructure, or this is the the Python framework we're going to use here. You can do a lot of that with just the ideas of things. So this is something that can absolutely run concurrently to effort you make picking out a vendor, effort you make building your pipeline. So you can spend a lot of time, and then it really helps to write this down, to draw it out, to say, hey, this talks to this solid line here, arrow if necessary, and just kind of scribble it out. I learn a lot from being, visual and kinetic, and so that helps me a lot. And so when I can envision it and make sure it all works, maybe a little documentation key on the side. One, save that. That is invaluable in terms of communicating what this is, teaching developers what it is they need to be working on, or trying to figure out what's wrong and iterating on something. This is definitely a document you want to keep internally for some time. But it also just kind of it teaches better. Teach through show don't tell. It allows you to draw out, okay, we need to focus on this piece of problem, and so it becomes kind of a living document, a flag, if you will, that you can point at and say, here's what we're looking at. Here's where we're struggling, right? Okay, there's this is its own project. Let's talk about this, and having something to kind of point at really helps.
Okay, that makes sense. I mean, definitely, right? Because in teams that I've been involved with, especially coming at it from a security or application security side, it's really helpful when that type of diagram exists, because then I can start, looking at, even if it's not detailed what vendor we're going to go with. If we have like pub sub, we have different things. Okay, I will then start looking at what are the security risks with dealing with this? What are the best practices? I'm a big best practice person, right? Because not everything you're just going to know off back. It's like, what are the best practices, or what are the common security vulnerabilities that have been exposed with this particular piece of the architecture? So from a security perspective, that's what I start looking at and start thinking through, so that when I'm now looking at requirements, when we're doing certain things, I can then put those in the backlog and look at, okay, this is things we have to look out for. And, these are things that we have to actually test against. So I definitely like that. Can we, we're probably going to circle back on technology. Let's talk about team. Like, how does that work in terms of selecting the team of resources you need, working, and also working with other non-technical teams, or just people that are ancillary to the process?
I mean, I think that a really good company has two distinct pieces, right? Someone who really understands the business side, and they get, the funding, they can dream up the project, they can talk with investors, and someone who really understands the technology, right? Those are like the two pieces of a brain of a really good startup. And so I don't think it's unheard of to just kind of expect, if you're first person on the ground, and you're the tech person, right, you're going to be lifting. You're going to be putting on the hard hat and, putting the vest on and going to work every day. So, when money is at a premium, as it often is here, right, the big question is, like, at what time does investing in more technical resources enable us to move faster, right? Is it a matter like, okay, I'm a great generalist, but I have limitations when it comes to, X. Okay, if I bring someone in, we'll move much quicker on this kind of bottleneck here, and I'll be freed up to do this. Right. That's one scenario. Another scenario is like, I really don't like doing this work. I want to pay someone. That's probably not the right justification for bringing someone in. Right. This person, you're going to have to assume they're going to be picking up your context, being a crucial, member of support for what you're doing and moving forward, and integral to success. So you don't just want to trivially bring someone in to check a box, right? You kind of want to know, hey, this is something that we need to focus on. It's going to grow. It's going to be a bigger, problem moving forward. We need someone to focus on this. And sometimes it's not just like a specialist. Sometimes it's like, hey, there's so much work to do. We get someone who comes in and they just, generally a good dev, right? We're gonna unbottleneck ourselves. So that's one thing to think in regards to tech team. Again, what are the needs, what are the requirements, and where are we going with this, right? Think what you need now, but also think what the ramifications of making that change are going to look like 6 months from now and 12 months from now. You look at, I know the tech industry at large, and especially the gaming industry, you see huge layoffs because they had these pie in the sky dreams that, everyone was going to be locked up in the pandemic forever playing video games and remote working. And they hired and they, now, okay, times are tough. We got to lay off people. And honestly, as a leader, that's a terrible feeling I never want to have to go through. Having someone whose livelihood depends on you and then saying, hey, we don't need you anymore. So I, at a personal level, try to avoid it for those reasons. Just additionally, that's disruption, right? That is, if you have to cut down the size of a team, you are going to find all these bottlenecks that you'd previously solved. You're going to find a bunch of struggle, a bunch of tech debt that had been accommodated for. So kind of thinking forward when you're looking at staffing is real important to say, how is this new role going to serve our long-term goal? And does it align like that? So that's kind of the tech side of things. And I'm just huge into efficiency. So I'm like, I don't want to do something superfluous. I don't want to grow where it's not going to help us. So personally, I tend to shoot close to the hip. I don't try to stick my neck out and overhire for excitement, because that just is, you're gonna hurry up and wait. You'll run to the next point and then you'll have issues. And if that team you hired isn't ready, you're going to have to figure out how to solve this one with a team that's not optimized for it. So that's tech roles in general. You asked about other people, but I wanted to give you a sec.
Yeah, these are good points. I want to harp on a couple of things because it makes sense. I think I'm going to start using that term, hurry up and wait. I like that. It sounds familiar, but I haven't used that, so I like that. But two, right? And this is not to play Monday night quarterback, right? Look, we saw what happened in 2020, right? A lot of the technology industry and other industries, especially those that depended on technology, hired massively. I mean, it was just like, you get a job, like Oprah, you get a job, right? It's just like crazy. So now you fast forward some years later, we have some wars breaking out, we have interest rates high, we have money, like you said, is at a premium to get, market conditions are different, people are outside again, massive layoffs. And some of the CEOs of those firms came out and said plainly, listen, we messed up, we overhired. And now in looking at your methodology in terms of, we have this thought about hiring, and saying, okay, I shoot close to the hip. One, right? In order to do that, I think you have to be a really hands-on CTO. That's number one, right? Would you agree with that before I move on?
I'd say hands-on in regard of understanding context. I don't want to say like micromanagey, but you should, understand, hey, this is a domain, this is so-and-so's domain, but I understand this, I understand the problems they face, so in terms of having all the context, right, that's important. And it's a lot. You can't hold all the context, so you have to be able to delegate that. But knowing who you can trust to hold the context for you, is another piece of that. So yeah, understanding your org, understanding your business, and really kind of getting it are crucial to succeeding.
I mean, like from a micromanagement perspective, I just meant from a technical perspective.
Sure.
That's what I meant. Like, in order to shoot close to the hip, right? A lot of people, we need to bring on these bodies to do these tasks. You're like, no, I need to do some of these tasks myself initially, right? And then when it becomes too overwhelming and blocking me, or I'm become the bottleneck, let's bring someone on to now relieve that bottleneck situation, so that we can grow faster. Because with the methodology that you're laying out, it leans towards speed and efficiency. So at any point in time, those are compromised. We have to bring someone in to take us to the next level. That doesn't mean we're hiring 20 people off that, because it's like, what's the justification? So it's an interesting concept, and I think that can help the avoidance of overhiring. And then when things get slim, then having to cut back 50% or some ridiculous amount of your workforce. All right, understand that. So I just wanted to kind of talk through that, but based on your explanation. Now, there's other teams now, right? You have to interact with, right? It's a product team or a product manager. There's obviously the C-suite. There's obviously the board. There are sometimes a security team, depending on the size of the startup. They might have a security resource, or they might not have a security person at all, but they might have a team with that. There's in the C-suite, finance guys. How do all those interactions work?
Yeah, great question. It's something that you can never script or prepare for, because everyone's different, right? You might have a firebrand of a CISO in one place, and then the next place they might just completely defer to you in regards to what needs to be done. You got to stay flexible in terms of how you deal with people, how you understand people, and how you figure out to work with them. Sometimes you got to lead a horse to water. You can't make it drink, but sometimes you just got to lay it out. Like, listen, right? Here's all the things. I am not trying to argue in terms of right or wrong, because this is your decision to make. But it's going to cost $1,500, every couple weeks this way, or it's going to cost $25 this way, right? I know what I want to do. I think I need you to make that decision, because it isn't, you don't run the whole everything, right? You have to let people have their domains, let people run their side of the org. And so even if you up and down, you're like, hey, this is something that's crucial for our success. Depending on the person, sometimes you can't just say it. Sometimes you got to lead them to it and let them discover that. So understanding who you work with, understanding the priorities of the team and the individuals, learning how to talk with them, learning how to make a coherent argument. These are all crucial in terms of kind of convincing people. It's an element of rhetoric, right? Because if you're in a position, a CTO, well, hopefully you know some things, and hopefully you are capable of using that experience and knowledge to help your company succeed. That's all you can do, right? You pull yourself up by the bootstraps, you're going to fall on your face, right? That's not a thing, right? You can just support your team with what you bring to the table. So having that knowledge and experiences is one key element, but knowing how to apply that, knowing how to communicate that, knowing how to work with people to find a compromise that works is a huge element that a lot of people kind of forget, because, engineering, here's efficient, here's right, here's wrong. A lot of people like to get sucked into okay, what's the best option? And it's not, it's a blur. It's a melting pot of ideas, of intelligent people involved. And so all you can do is say well, this is my dish. I know how to cook this, so I'm going to present it to you. And if the person wants to eat with a spoon, you give them a spoon. But it's just a matter of, right, here's what I have, here's what I'm bringing to the table, here's what we need. Now, what do you want to do with this information?
It's almost like an internal consulting. Right?
Yeah.
Because, what I've seen some really good people in that position. I've seen some really, and sometimes when the people that get so steadfast, and this is what, it's one of those things, right? you have a hammer, then everything looks like a nail, right? This is what I do. Let's just use this. I'm like, dude, like we should do a little bit of research. Like, what are some other options, right? But I like how you said it. It's like, you and I'm paraphrasing and correct me where I'm wrong. You can't be so emotionally tied to this is our path. It's more so working with your team to say, listen, here are our options. And if we go down this path, here's the potential result. We go down this path and here's what it costs, So yeah, maybe if we do this, it's going to be a shorter time to release to production, but it's going to cost us X amount per few weeks, right? This is the debt that we're paying. But if we spend a little bit more time, right, and put it out, a little later, right, and we cut down on some of the features, it's going to cost us, 75% less, right? Now we kind of need to see, is it worth it? If it's a critical, if the time is the constraint, we might have to eat that cost, right? If not, then we might go this option. But I like the concept, right, of putting all the facts out, then working with the various team members, especially from a CEO perspective and finance people, to say, oh, here's our situation. And in doing that, have you found success with that approach?
Generally, yeah. I think I was trying to think of a better way to say this, but respect is as respect does, right? If you're in a position where you have something contribute and you want to bring it to the company, right? And no one respects you, you can't do that. Right. And so how do you gain respect, right? It's a bit of a currency. It's not something that you can come in and boss your way around and get unless you're in a very dysfunctional situation, right? You really have to, it's equitable. You give respect and you get respect, right? These other people involved in the company are there because they are, masters of their own domain in some regard, because they are experts in some, area that you might not necessarily be. And so it's really important to, not just look at this as, okay, how am I going to get my idea across, right? It's an open door of communication, right? They might be seeing something you're not. So that humility is important. So has it worked for me? Yeah, and I think why has been because I could do that. I look to a person. I'm like, okay, what are you bringing to the table? What can I learn from you? There's that saying, right, that if you're the smartest person in the room, get out. If you're not learning from other people there, if everyone is just, looking up to you, then you're carrying this whole company on your back, which sounds real uncomfortable. And so that's, I've been fortunate to be surrounded by some really great people, some really great leaders, and treating them and their ideas with respect and bringing my ideas to them with respect has generally been very successful, because, you're not trying to win an argument. You're trying to do what's best for the company. Right? If you understand that it's not about your ego, it's not about their ego, it's about, the ultimate goals here. And if you're aligned in that, then yeah, you get great work from people you work alongside, who work above you or work below you. It's a matter of kind of understanding that we're all in this system together and we're all trying to swim, No,
I absolutely love it. And I know that we're almost approaching time, and I want to now kind of circle back, right, in terms of the technology side, right? So we did all the things and we finally made it to production, right? We have users that are using it. Now what? How do you maintain that? Or is maintain even the right word? Are we have to do now different iterations. We have to get customer feedback and put into our sprints. And for people that are new to these terms, sprints basically means like our release cycle. We have a cadence. What's next? What happens after that?
Well, I mean, the ideal is you build a well-oiled machine, right? It has to cover a million things, right? It has to be, performing appropriate, user feedback surveys. It has to be organization and prioritization of things. It has to be looking at new technical opportunities and saying, does this fit anywhere, right? You have a lot of things to consider, a lot of external stimuli to understand and to bring in, to digest and to utilize for your company. So, the ideal is that you have people in each of those positions who are capable of kind of reporting, saying, hey, here's what's going on. Here's what we're hearing. And then ultimately, what about this? And if you have the right machine, the right venue for this, you'll be able to get the ideas and start turning them around, seeing if they turn into a pearl, something that you can turn into a feature. If you're thinking about this well and it had enough time, you can say, hey, well, let's slate this feature for 6 months down the road. And even then, we're still going to be competitors. It's a matter of like, can you both take in new information and can you react quick enough to be efficient with it? And that's an octopus of a problem, right? You've got to have the right people. You've got to have the right communication patterns, the right rituals and structures. You've got to have communication standardized in the right way. There's no one piece. It's a hydra that you have to tackle here. I'm just going to keep coming up with many-armed and many-headed creatures and throw it out there. It's never a dull moment, right? There's no time to pop champagne while your company is still at work. I mean, sure, you got to celebrate, but like, there's always going to be a tomorrow. There's always going to be a new challenge, and you don't know what it is. So you have to have the structures in place to comprehend it and deal with it. And that's kind of a never-ending battle.
Wow, I love that. And now, I want to ask you a question about security as a close. Before I do that, we have to have a message from our sponsors, and we'll be right back.
Are you an emerging fintech with a limited budget seeking more sales and partners? Introducing Strategic Generation, your partner in leveraging cybersecurity for sales and partner enablement. Fintechs often lose opportunities due to unsophisticated cybersecurity programs. That's where we come in. Strategic Generation assists with due diligence, security posture visibility, penetration testing, and on-demand virtual CISO services. We connect your systems to our partnered platform, and voila! Instant access to real-time diagnostics and compliance frameworks such as SOC 2 and PCI DSS. Gain the confidence of prospects and partners. Strengthen your cybersecurity program and drive success. Stop losing deals due to cybersecurity. Visit strategicgeneration.com and click on On-Demand CISO to connect with an expert.
Just like that, we are back. So I want to close off. So, because obviously my cybersecurity background, people know that. How important, or at what point, in your opinion, should you bring security in or start thinking about security? How does that work? And that's a two-part question. And, do you feel that it slows down the progress of releasing products?
I mean, nothing's going to slow progress down more than like not even a hole in the boat, like a missing side of the boat. The thing is, a security incident, unless you're a very well-established company, it's likely to tank you. It's likely to end everything, right? If you get hacked and your users' information gets out there and you're just a small firm, you've lost all your trust. If there's actually some element that you can be sued over for the financial data perhaps that you're dealing with, like that's game over for many, if not most companies. It needs to be taken as seriously as possible. So security needs to start right off the bat. And it could be as simple as like, okay, right now I'm making a sample database to connect to. Right? How do I connect to it? Well, okay, let's at least like figure out the password strategy, because that's best practice, obviously. So what do you do in that first test password, right? Okay, maybe you and your devs can pass that around. But as soon as you say, hey, we know how to make this connection, we want to have a database in our dev environment, and you are going to copy that pattern to go forward into prod, to develop on, right? You want to make sure that all the obvious pieces, like, okay, how is this password secured? How do we exchange password? Like, what are the authentication methods? You want to make sure that gets baked in as early as possible, because the further along you go, it's kind of like trying to put a tablecloth underneath an already set table. There's so many, okay, lift that glass, lift that plate, it's really difficult. So if you can get that set before any of the, flatware, silverware on, it's going to be so much easier. So if you just say, hey, this is the pattern of security, and that's built into, say, those CI/CD pipelines, right? That framework that you have to keep doing things, well, you're not going to have to readdress it later when it's big, right? And you want to revisit, you want to audit and make sure all the practices are right, but you set yourself up for success up front, and you'll save so much time and ultimately having security in place.
We love that analogy. I'm going to use it. And regarding the tablecloth, that's an amazing analogy. That concludes our show today. Brilliant conversation. I really enjoyed it, Matt. So what we do for our guests at this time, I'm going to give you the floor to talk about whatever you want to talk about, how people can find you and, your firm and so forth. So I'm going to get off stage and give you that opportunity.
Hey, yeah. Well, things are really new. I just kicked off a new company, Sophist Software Consulting. So we've got some domains, but we don't have anything up yet. Right now, you can get me at LinkedIn. I believe my URL is Matt Almeida's Career. But within the next month, we'll have some stuff up in terms of LinkedIn pages, an actual web page for the company. And I've got some YouTube ideas I want to push along concurrently in a side project that I'm going to call PEBCAC Philosophy. For those of you who don't know, PEBCAC is problem exists between chair and keyboard. It's a term from support where it's like, okay, what's the real problem here and how can we solve that? So I want to, in the series, think about, another way of troubleshooting, another way of problem shooting, another way of thinking about your tech problems, opening them up and thinking about them more holistically. And yeah, ultimately that will all support Sophist Software Consulting, which you can get some time with me as a consultant, as a part-time CTO for work on projects. Definitely interested to hear any of your needs. So my email address is pf1matt, M-A-T-T, @gmail.com for now. I'll get a more official domain up. And next time I'm on the show, hopefully I'm ready with all that stuff.
Sounds great. I also put it up your LinkedIn URL at the bottom. So you guys are watching this video on repeat, you can just pause it and copy that down and just re-listen to the email address and so forth. Matt, thank you very much for today. Really enjoyed the conversation. As always, I enjoy all our conversations actually. Conversations and so forth. They're really good. Sometimes Matt and I have different takes on technology, but it's always just like we hear each other's opinions, we go back and forth, and I always enjoy that in terms of talking to you about technology and so forth. But now just doing it in front of a whole lot of people, one-on-one. So everyone else, thank you very much for joining in. My folks on Instagram, appreciate you. People on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, thank you so much. Thank you for the comments. Thank you for the comments you guys post. Thank you for the DMs, the likes, everything. Really appreciate that. Tech Behind FinTech, you can catch us every week live, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you go to techbehindfintech.com, we have our links there. We've also been posting mini clips and so forth. We have Christopher Moon. Great show, you two. Oh, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Thank you for everything. Really appreciate it. And on that note, everyone have a really great weekend. Like Matt just mentioned, it's warm this weekend in some of the East Coast, and you're in
Portland, Oregon.
Yeah, Portland. So, it's warmed out here too. So I think we're going to enjoy ourselves. So on that note, we are out. Cheers to everyone.
Thanks so much, Namdi. Always a pleasure.
Yes, sir.
Understanding the technology that powers the money is essential. Knowing the business drivers that inspire how the money is made is crucial. Bridging the gap between the mind of the technologist and the mind of the business is monumental. That is what TBF is all about. Let's start this never-ending conversation. It's time.